Welcome back, guys, to MysteryCon. On this channel I narrate conspiracy theories to help you sleep and relax. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe, and also share this video with your friends and family to help them fall asleep too. Please let me know where you're watching this from and what time it is for you. Now sit back, relax, and let's begin. I never thought I'd find myself standing at the edge of the Sphinx's paws, my fingers brushing against something I wasn't supposed to see. It felt unreal. As I bent down to get a closer look, I could feel my heart race. I was an expert in ancient civilizations, but what I was holding in my hands didn't belong here. Not in Egypt, not in any place on Earth. The artifact I had discovered, small enough to be mistaken for a trinket, seemed harmless at first. But as I traced the alien-looking symbols engraved into its surface, a chill ran down my spine. It was unlike anything I had ever seen, symbols that didn't belong to any known language. As I held it, something strange pulsed from within the object. I could feel it. My mind spun with possibilities. Could this be evidence of something extraterrestrial? I had spent my life studying human history, Sumerians, Egyptians, Mayans, but nothing had ever intrigued me as much as this. I had always believed in the advancement of human civilizations through their ingenuity alone. But now, with this object in my hands, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something else at play, something hidden just beneath the surface of our history. As I stood there, the excavation site around me seemed to fade away. The desert wind blew through the ancient stones, carrying with it a quiet sense of urgency. My heart pounded louder in my ears, urging me to make a decision. Should I take this artifact with me? Should I dive into something that could alter everything I thought I knew about the origins of human civilization? I stuffed the object into my bag, not caring who saw. I didn't need anyone else's opinion, especially not now. As I walked away from the site, I felt like something had shifted in me, like I had crossed some invisible line. I had just uncovered a clue, one that could either prove my wildest suspicions or tear down everything I had worked for. That night, as the moonlight filtered through my window, I couldn't shake the image of the artifact from my mind. I tried to fall asleep, but the symbols danced in my head, relentlessly pushing me to look further. I opened my laptop and began researching. The more I looked, the more I found strange references in ancient texts, hidden meanings, myths of gods descending from the sky. The Sumerians, the Egyptians, the Mayans, they all spoke of beings that came from the heavens. Was it possible? Could these gods really have been extraterrestrials, shaping human civilization from the very beginning? A cold shiver ran through me as I scrolled through the pages. There were no clear answers, only more questions. I glanced at the artifact in my bag across the room, a sense of dread creeping over me. It was just a feeling, but it was there. I was being watched. Someone, or something, was aware of my discovery. I closed my laptop and sat in silence. The hum of the night air outside seemed louder now, almost deafening. I could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on me. The truth about human civilization was within my grasp, but was I ready to uncover it? Was I ready to face what I might find? This was no ordinary discovery. No ordinary artifact. This was the beginning of something far bigger than anything I could have ever imagined. And I wasn't sure if I was prepared for the consequences of finding out the truth. The morning after I found the artifact, I couldn't get the symbols out of my mind. They weren't just some odd pattern, they felt like a code, something I wasn't meant to understand yet, but that beckoned me closer with each passing moment. I sat at my desk, the artifact still lying in front of me, the sunlight catching on its smooth surface. I had to know more. I'd called in a few favors from old colleagues, some well-respected experts in ancient languages and archaeology. One of them, Dr. Henry Mitchell, had spent years deciphering ancient Sumerian texts. I didn't trust him with the artifact itself, too risky, but I sent him high-quality images of the symbols. I wasn't sure what I was expecting from him. Would he be intrigued? Skeptical? Or dismissive, like most others had been when I suggested the possibility of extraterrestrial involvement in human history? The email I received from him that evening was brief, yet it sent a shockwave through my mind. I think we need to talk. This is unlike anything I've seen before. Meet me tomorrow at the university. The next morning, I walked into his office with a mix of excitement and fear. Dr. Mitchell had a sharp, academic air about him. He wasn't the type to be easily impressed, so I braced myself for a round of polite skepticism. Instead, when he saw the images of the symbols, his face shifted, just for a moment, before he composed himself. "These markings," he began, his voice low, "they don't belong to any known civilization. At least, not one that's ever been documented." He paused, leaning back in his chair. "But they do look familiar. There's an old legend I came across in my early research, a story that's been dismissed for years. A tale about celestial beings who taught the Sumerians the secrets of the stars." I leaned in, my curiosity piqued. "Celestial beings? What exactly do you mean?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached for a dusty, leather-bound book on his shelf. Flipping through the pages, he stopped at a page marked with an old, faded symbol that matched one of the engravings on the artifact. His finger traced the lines of the symbol, and his eyes locked with mine. "This is it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The same symbol. The ancient Sumerians believed it was a representation of Anu, their god of the heavens. But this isn't just a god. It's a being from the stars, a creature who came to Earth to guide their people. And the stories, the ones about gods descending from the heavens, they weren't just myths. They were records of real events." My stomach tightened. Was this it? Was this the evidence I had been looking for all along? But how could this be? I asked, struggling to process the enormity of what he was suggesting. How could the Sumerians have known about these beings? These gods, or aliens, if there was no contact? Dr. Mitchell looked at me, his face a mask of disbelief, then pointed at the ancient text in front of us. "Because, Emily, the Sumerians weren't the only ones. There are similar records in Egyptian hieroglyphs, Mayan codices, even in cultures as far apart as the Inuit and the Aboriginal Australians. All of them speak of beings from the sky, who came to them, who taught them things. They were the same beings. They came, they left, and now, there's something even bigger happening. I think they're coming back." A cold shiver ran down my spine as his words sank in. The more I thought about it, the more it felt like I was on the brink of something monumental. But what could I do with this information? Would the world believe it? Was it even safe to share? My mind raced with questions, but I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in my gut. I had just touched the surface of something too big for anyone to ignore. And now I needed answers. But as I prepared to leave Dr. Mitchell's office, a thought hit me. What if this wasn't just about ancient knowledge? What if the return of these beings wasn't some far-off event? What if it was happening right now, and I was standing at the edge of discovering humanity's biggest secret? It's strange how, once you begin to unravel one mystery, another seems to surface, darker and more sinister than the last. After my meeting with Dr. Mitchell, I couldn't help but feel like I was no longer walking alone in this pursuit of truth. There were forces at work that I hadn't even begun to comprehend. Forces that would do anything to keep the world from discovering what I had found. I began to notice things, small, seemingly inconsequential events, that made me uneasy. At first, I thought I was imagining it. A black SUV parked near my apartment building, always just out of view, its tinted windows obscuring any sign of life within. A strange phone call, the voice on the other end a garbled mess of static and low-frequency hums. I dismissed it, thinking I was simply paranoid. But then, it happened again and again. The breakthrough came late one night, as I sat alone in my office, sifting through ancient texts and artifact images. There was a sudden knock on my door. I froze. Not many people knew where I was. I hadn't told anyone about the artifact I'd found, and certainly not about my meeting with Dr. Mitchell. I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest, my mind racing through possibilities. When I opened the door, a man in a black suit stood before me, his face expressionless, his eyes cold. His presence was unsettling, and I instantly knew he wasn't just another academic interested in ancient civilizations. "I'm Agent Harris," he said, his voice flat and professional. "We need to talk about your recent research. May I come in?" I stood frozen for a moment, weighing my options. The warning signs had been there all along. This wasn't a coincidence, and this wasn't someone who just wanted to discuss ancient texts. There was something more to this, something far more dangerous. I stepped aside and let him in, though I could feel the weight of my decision pressing down on me. Harris took a seat across from me, his eyes scanning the room with a chilling precision. His posture was stiff, controlled. "We know what you found," he said, his words like ice. "And we don't want it getting out. There are things in this world you don't understand, Dr. Carr. Things that, if exposed, could bring everything crashing down." I felt a lump form in my throat. "Who are you? And why are you telling me this?" He leaned forward, his gaze never leaving mine. "I represent an organization that has spent decades, even centuries, keeping certain truths hidden. These truths are dangerous, Dr. Carr. They are not meant for public knowledge." I shook my head, disbelief mixing with anger. "You're telling me that what I'm uncovering isn't just some lost civilization's myth? That it's real, and you want to suppress it?" Harris didn't flinch. "Exactly. There's a reason these so-called gods, the aliens, left us alone for centuries. They don't belong here. They never should have been involved with human civilization. But now, they're coming back. And if the world learns the truth, it will tear everything apart." I took a step back, the enormity of his words crashing into me. "You're saying the aliens aren't benevolent? That they want to what? Destroy us?" He didn't answer directly, but his eyes held a cold certainty. "What matters is not whether they mean us harm. What matters is that humanity is not ready for their return. And we intend to make sure that doesn't happen." My mind reeled. This was bigger than anything I had imagined. There were forces working against me, and they weren't just some obscure secret society. They were part of a much larger organization, one with a terrifying agenda. As Harris stood up, he slid a manila envelope across the table to me. "This is a warning," he said, his voice low and ominous. "Stop looking. The truth you seek isn't something you can handle." I stared at the envelope, my fingers trembling. What was inside? And what would happen if I ignored this warning? Harris turned and walked out without another word, leaving me alone with the weight of his message, and the mysterious envelope. I opened it, only to find a single page, its contents cryptic and disturbing. It was a map to a hidden location, somewhere in the world, with the words, "The Architect's Arrival," written beneath it. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just taken my first step into a world of unimaginable power and danger. The organization didn't just want to suppress the truth. They wanted to control it. And now, I had a choice to make. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Ever since that meeting with Agent Harris, I had been on edge, unable to focus on anything for more than a few minutes at a time. The cryptic map he'd left behind gnawed at me, its unsettling message still echoing in my mind. The Architect's Arrival. What did it mean? And why had they chosen to involve me? It was clear now that I was no longer just a researcher seeking answers. I had stumbled onto something much larger, something that threatened the foundation of everything I believed. But I couldn't walk away. The deeper I dug, the more questions I uncovered. And no matter how many times I told myself to stop, the allure of the truth kept pulling me back in. The map was my first clue. After studying it carefully, I realized it wasn't just a location, it was a warning. The place it pointed to wasn't marked on any standard map, and there was no mention of it in any historical records. It felt like something deliberately hidden, just waiting to be found by the right person. I knew I had to go there. But I also knew I wasn't going to be alone in my search. I started gathering information, piecing together the fragments of knowledge that had been buried for centuries. The Mayan codices, the ancient Egyptian texts, the Sumerian tablets. I began to see patterns emerging. These ancient civilizations had been connected in ways I hadn't fully understood before. They had all spoken of beings from the sky, of gods who had taught them, guided them. It was no coincidence that the same symbols I had found on the artifact appeared across these cultures. But there was one major problem. The information I was uncovering was fragmentary. Most of the key texts had been lost, destroyed, or deliberately hidden by those who came after. If I was going to get to the bottom of this, I needed access to archives and resources that I didn't have. So I turned to someone who might. I reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to in years, James. He had been an old colleague from my early days in the field. A brilliant archaeologist, James had a knack for finding things that others couldn't. I hadn't trusted him back then, but now, he might be the only person who could help me. When he answered my call, his voice sounded different, distant, almost like he was hiding something. But he agreed to meet, and we arranged a time in a small cafe, tucked away on a quiet street. I couldn't help but wonder if I was walking into a trap. As soon as I saw him, I knew something was off. His eyes were too alert, his movements too deliberate. He was always a bit paranoid, but this was different. He didn't waste any time. "I know what you're looking for, Emily," he said, leaning in close. "And I don't think you understand the danger you're in. There are people who would kill to keep this buried. I've seen it. I've felt it." I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words settle in my chest. "What do you mean? What's going on, James?" He glanced around nervously, as though making sure no one was listening. "The thing is, you're not the only one who's been digging into this. There are other groups that have been tracking these artifacts for years, decades even. The thing is, they don't just want to find out the truth. They want to control it. And you're in the way." I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. "You mean the Guardians? The ones Harris warned me about?" He nodded, his face pale. "They've been following your work. They know you're close to uncovering something big, and they won't stop until they erase every trace of it." The implications hit me like a punch to the gut. I had known I wasn't the only one searching for the truth, but hearing it from James made it feel real. The danger was no longer just a vague feeling. It was here. It was real. And I had to make a choice: keep going, despite the risks, or walk away and forget what I had found. James slid a folder across the table to me. "I've been collecting some of the texts that were hidden in private collections. They're not easy to get, but if you want to understand what's happening, this will help." I opened the folder cautiously, scanning the pages. It was filled with more references to the ancient gods, to the aliens, to the return. But there was one passage that stood out. It spoke of a coming event, the arrival of the architects, and how humanity would be forced to choose between joining them or facing extinction. I closed the folder, my mind spinning. This wasn't just about knowledge anymore. It was about survival. "I can't stop now," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I need to know the truth. I have to finish what I started." James looked at me with a mix of concern and fear. "Then you need to be careful. This isn't just an academic pursuit anymore, Emily. This is real. And the closer you get to the truth, the more dangerous it becomes." I don't know how long I had been sitting there, staring at the pages James had given me, trying to make sense of everything. The words blurred together in a haze of ancient texts, symbols, and warnings. It was like trying to solve a puzzle with pieces that didn't quite fit. But the more I read, the more I realized I wasn't looking at myths or stories anymore. This was real. And the truth was hidden in plain sight. I needed to go deeper. There was only one place left to investigate, a hidden chamber beneath the Sphinx. Dr. Mitchell had mentioned it in passing once, but it was more of a legend than a confirmed location. Theories had existed for years, suggesting that something lay buried beneath the ancient monument, but no one had ever managed to prove it. The authorities had always dismissed it as nothing more than a wild conspiracy. But now, with the knowledge I had, I knew better. I had arranged to meet James the next morning. He had a contact, a man who had been involved in excavation work beneath the Sphinx. After some negotiation and a promise to keep things quiet, James secured access to the site. As we approached the entrance, the enormity of what we were about to do hit me. The weight of centuries of history pressed down on my shoulders. But there was no turning back now. The passageway beneath the Sphinx was narrow and claustrophobic, the air thick with the scent of dust and age. My heart pounded in my chest as we descended deeper into the earth, the sound of our footsteps echoing through the darkness. I could feel the ancient stone surrounding me, almost as if it were watching, waiting for us to uncover its secrets. We reached a small chamber, the walls adorned with intricate carvings and symbols that matched the ones I had found on the artifact. It was the same as the ancient text James had given me. This wasn't just a tomb or a ceremonial room, it was something more. I knelt down to examine one of the carvings, my fingers tracing the smooth stone. The markings seemed to glow faintly in the dim light, as though they had been waiting for someone to uncover them. Suddenly, something caught my eye, a small indentation in the wall. I pressed my hand against it instinctively, and to my surprise the wall shifted, revealing a hidden door. I looked at James, my breath catching in my throat. "This is it," I whispered. "This is what we've been searching for." James didn't say anything. He just nodded, his face pale with a mixture of awe and fear. We stepped through the door, into a room unlike anything I had ever seen before. The chamber was filled with strange, alien technology, gleaming metallic objects and pulsating energy sources that seemed to hum with life. There were tablets, almost like modern-day computer screens, etched with more symbols I recognized from the artifact. And in the center of the room was a pedestal, atop which sat a glowing sphere, suspended in the air by an invisible force. I took a cautious step forward, my eyes locked on the sphere. It was beautiful, mesmerizing, but it held an eerie sense of power. It was as if it was calling to me, pulling me closer, demanding that I understand. I reached out slowly, my fingers brushing the surface of the sphere. As soon as my skin made contact, a surge of energy shot through me. I gasped, stumbling backward, my heart racing. The world around me seemed to shift, and for a moment, I saw flashes of images, ancient cities, alien ships descending from the sky, beings with glowing eyes, standing among the first humans, guiding them. The images vanished as quickly as they had appeared, leaving me shaken and breathless. My hands trembled as I looked at the glowing sphere. It was no longer just a relic. It was a message, one that had been waiting for me to unlock. James was staring at me, his face a mixture of awe and fear. "What did you see?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "I saw them," I whispered. "The architects. They came here. They guided us. They helped us build what we are. And now they're coming back." I could feel the weight of his gaze, the intensity of the moment pressing down on me. This wasn't just about uncovering the past anymore. This was about the future. The architects were returning, and we were standing at the crossroads of a decision that would change everything. But there was more. I hadn't just uncovered the truth. I had uncovered a choice. And as the chamber hummed with energy, I realized that the hardest part was yet to come. As the hours passed in the hidden chamber beneath the Sphinx, my mind was still reeling from what I had just uncovered. The glowing sphere, the ancient technology, the overwhelming realization that everything I had studied in my career, every theory, every text, every myth, was now being turned upside down. The architects were real. They had come to Earth, shaped human civilization, and now they were preparing to return. But why? What was their ultimate goal? James and I sat in the chamber, barely speaking, each of us lost in our thoughts. The silence was broken only by the faint hum of the alien technology surrounding us. I couldn't stop staring at the sphere, its energy still pulsing gently in the center of the room. There was something about it that felt alive, something beyond the physical that seemed to connect me to the architects themselves. It was as if they were reaching out, waiting for me to understand. "Do you think they're watching us?" James asked suddenly, his voice barely above a whisper. I turned to look at him, startled by the question. "What do you mean? I mean, do you think they're aware of us? Of what we're doing right now?" I thought about it for a moment. The answer was unsettling. "I think they've always been aware. After all, they guided us, shaped us. Our entire civilization, it was built with their influence." James looked at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You really believe that?" I nodded slowly. "I saw it, James. The images. They came from the sphere. They showed me the past, how the architects were there from the very beginning. From the Sumerians to the Egyptians, the Mayans, all of them. The gods they worshipped? They weren't gods. They were the architects, extraterrestrial beings who came to Earth and gave humanity the tools to build advanced societies." The more I spoke, the more I realized how incredible it all sounded. But I wasn't imagining it. The evidence was right in front of me. Everything I had believed about human history had been a lie. And the architects weren't just a part of the past. They were part of our future. I stood up and walked over to the pedestal, reaching out to touch the glowing sphere again. The moment my fingers made contact, the images returned. This time, they were clearer. I saw humanity's evolution, an almost artificial progression of civilization. The architects had intervened at critical points in history, pushing humanity forward, accelerating our development in ways that shouldn't have been possible. The images shifted. I saw a large, sprawling city, its architecture impossibly advanced. Massive structures built with perfect symmetry, energy sources that seemed to defy the laws of physics. There were beings, tall, glowing figures, their faces obscured, but I could feel their presence, their intelligence. They moved among the humans, guiding them, teaching them the secrets of the universe. The images flickered again, this time showing a darker side. The architects weren't just benevolent teachers. There were moments of tension, of fear. Humans, driven by their newfound knowledge, began to push back against their creators. They sought to break free from their influence, to claim their own destiny. And in response, the architects retreated, leaving behind only clues, only hints of their existence. As the images faded, I felt a sense of dread settle over me. "They left," I whispered, barely able to speak the words. "They abandoned us." James stood up and walked over to me, his expression grim. "And now they're coming back." I turned to face him, my mind spinning with the implications of what I had just witnessed. "But why? Why did they leave? And why return now?" James ran his hand through his hair, looking more disturbed than I had ever seen him. "That's the part that scares me. If they come back, what do they want? Are they coming to guide us again, or to finish what they started?" I didn't have an answer. The architects had shaped us, given us everything we had, but they had left us with no explanation, no clarity on what they wanted from us. I could feel the weight of their return pressing down on me. If they came back, we would be forced to choose, to accept their guidance once more, or to reject them entirely. But rejecting them wasn't an option. Not now. Not after everything I had seen. "I think we need to find out more," I said, my voice steady but uncertain. "We need to understand why they left, why they're coming back, and what they expect from us." James didn't argue. He simply nodded, his face hardening with determination. I'll help you. But you need to understand the stakes. This isn't just about finding out the truth anymore. It's about what happens when the truth gets out. There are forces that will stop at nothing to keep us from uncovering it. I glanced down at the glowing sphere once more. The architects had given us everything, but they had also left us to fend for ourselves. Now, their return loomed on the horizon. We didn't just need answers. We needed to be ready. But what could humanity do when faced with beings far more advanced than ourselves? Could we stand alongside the architects as their equals, or would we become their subjugates once again? The further I dug into the mystery of the architects, the more it seemed like the ground beneath me was shifting. Every discovery, every new piece of evidence, made it harder to separate the truth from the lies. But the hardest part wasn't the research, it was the people around me. People I had trusted, who I thought were on my side. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was no longer playing this game alone. The stakes had escalated, and I was starting to realize that the worst was yet to come. I hadn't heard from James in 2 days, which was unusual. He'd been a constant presence by my side throughout this journey. We had pieced together the puzzle, connecting the dots between ancient civilizations, hidden technologies, and the cryptic message the architects had left behind. But now, as I sat in my office, poring over the latest batch of documents James had handed me, something didn't feel right. The phone call came just as the sun was setting. The voice on the other end was breathless, almost frantic. Emily, you need to listen to me. They're watching you. I froze, my blood running cold. James? What's going on? Where are you? There was a long pause before he spoke again, his voice shaky. I never should have gotten involved with you. I thought I could help, but I was wrong. The Guardians, they know everything. They've been following us, and now they've got their eyes on you. They're coming for you, Emily. You need to disappear. The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. The Guardians. The shadowy organization that had warned me off the truth. The people who had been tracking my every move. But now, something was different. James was afraid. This wasn't the confident archaeologist I had once trusted. Something had changed, and I could feel it in the pit of my stomach. James, what are you talking about? You need to tell me where you are, now. Another pause. Then, in a low voice, he whispered, I'm sorry. I thought I could protect you. But I'm not the one you should be worried about anymore. It's them. Before I could respond, the line went dead. Panic surged through me, and I slammed the phone down, my heart racing. What had just happened? James, my ally, had suddenly turned into a warning. A warning about the very people I had been trying to uncover. But the biggest shock of all was that I couldn't shake the feeling that James had been part of it all along. What if he had known more than he let on? What if he had been feeding me half-truths, playing both sides? I gathered my things quickly, determined to find him, to demand the truth. But as I opened the door, I was greeted by the sound of a car screeching to a halt outside my apartment building. My heart skipped a beat as I peeked out the window. A black SUV, the same one I had seen days before, was parked across the street. I had seen it more times than I cared to count, but now, something about it felt different. This time, they were waiting for me. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. I knew I couldn't stay in my apartment. Not anymore. They had found me, and I was running out of time. I slipped out the back door and into the alley, my mind racing. Where could I go? Who could I trust? I needed answers. I needed to find James. But more than that, I needed to understand why he had turned on me. What had changed in him? And why hadn't I seen it coming? I didn't have much time to think. As I made my way down the alley, I noticed a figure in the shadows, a figure I recognized immediately. It was James. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. Was he here to help? Or had he come to finish what he had started? Emily, he said, his voice hoarse, almost pleading. You don't understand. I never wanted any of this to happen. I never wanted you to get hurt. I took a step back, my mind reeling. Then why didn't you tell me the truth? Why didn't you warn me? Everything we've uncovered, was it all a lie? James looked down, guilt written across his face. No, it wasn't a lie. But I couldn't tell you everything. The Guardians, they've been watching us for years. I was one of them. My blood ran cold. You were part of them? You've been lying to me the entire time? His face twisted in pain. I never wanted to. But they were too powerful. They knew everything about me, about my work. When I found out about the architects, they made it clear that I had to either help them stop you or face the consequences. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. My ally, my friend, had been working against me the entire time. The truth had been in front of me all along, but I had been too blind to see it. I'm sorry, James whispered, his voice breaking. But you can't stop them. You don't understand what they're capable of. I looked at him, my heart torn between betrayal and the need for answers. Then help me. Help me stop them. But James shook his head. It's too late, Emily. You can't fight them. They're already ahead of you. Before I could respond, there was a sharp noise from behind us. I turned just in time to see the shadows of more figures closing in, emerging from the darkness like predators hunting their prey. The sound of footsteps echoed through the alley as the figures closed in on us. My mind raced as I weighed my options, but deep down, I knew there was no way out of this. James had betrayed me. The Guardians were here. And now, I was being hunted for something far bigger than I had ever imagined. The truth I had uncovered was dangerous. Too dangerous to be left in the hands of people like them. I glanced at James, his face pale with fear. He was shaking too, but not from the cold. No, this was something deeper. He had led me into this mess, and now he was a prisoner of his own choices. His eyes locked onto mine, filled with regret. I'm sorry, Emily, he whispered, his voice strained. I didn't want this for you. But they'll never stop coming after you. Not after everything you've uncovered. I stepped back, my heart pounding in my chest. Then what do we do now? If they've been watching us all this time, if they've been keeping us from the truth, how do we stop them? Before James could answer, a voice rang out from the shadows. Running won't help you, Dr. Carr. A man stepped forward, his face partially obscured by the hood of his cloak. I couldn't see his features clearly, but I knew by the calm, commanding tone that he was someone in control, someone who knew far more than I did. Who are you? I demanded, trying to steady my breath. My name is Victor Cole, he said smoothly, his voice cold and distant. And I represent the Guardians. You've been playing a dangerous game, Emily. You've uncovered secrets that no one was meant to know. I took a step back, my mind racing. The Guardians had found me, had found us. But there was something about Victor that didn't sit right. He wasn't just another agent. He was different. There was an air of authority about him, something far more menacing than I had encountered before. We've been following your progress, Victor continued, his eyes never leaving mine. The discovery of the architects, the alien technology beneath the Sphinx, this isn't just history. This is the beginning of something far worse. The architect's return isn't a blessing. It's a curse. And you, Dr. Carr, have opened the door to their return. I felt a chill run down my spine. What do you mean? What's going to happen when they return? Victor's lips curled into a thin smile. You're not the first to ask that question. But the answer isn't something you want to know. These beings, these architects, have manipulated humanity from the shadows for thousands of years. They gave you the tools to build your civilizations, but they did so with a purpose. They created you, not as equals, but as their tools. And now, they're coming back to reclaim what's theirs. James shook his head, his voice barely a whisper. This isn't right. We can't let them come back. We can't let them control us again. Victor's gaze shifted to James, his expression unreadable. You're too late, James. The return is inevitable. But now, the choice is yours, Dr. Carr. You can either accept the architects' return and join them in their new world, or you can fight and watch as your civilization crumbles under the weight of forces you can't even begin to comprehend. I felt the weight of his words pressing down on me. My mind raced with possibilities, but there was one thing I knew for certain. I couldn't let this happen. I couldn't let these beings, these so-called architects, return and take control of humanity again. What do you want from me? I asked, my voice trembling, not just from fear, but from a deep, primal anger. I was done being manipulated. Done being a pawn in a game I didn't understand. Victor's eyes gleamed as he stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. We want you to stop searching. To stop digging into the past. The architect's return is already set in motion. Your choices are irrelevant now. But the Guardians have our own plan. One that doesn't involve you. I could feel my fists balling up in frustration. I won't stop. I won't stop until I know the truth. Until I know what they want from us. Victor's smile faded, his eyes hardening. Then prepare yourself, Dr. Carr. Because once the architects return, there's no going back. And I promise you, the truth you seek will only bring destruction. As he turned to leave, I glanced at James. His face was etched with fear, but there was something else there, too, something that told me he had always known this day would come. The architects were returning. And now, it was my choice. To accept them, or to fight against them. The weight of that decision felt unbearable, but as the sound of Victor's footsteps faded into the distance, I knew I had no choice but to fight. The next few days were a blur of frantic phone calls, secret meetings, and sleepless nights. The truth, if that's what it was, had been laid bare before me, and the weight of it pressed down on my chest like a suffocating force. The architects were coming back, and with them, a choice that would determine the fate of humanity. I wasn't just fighting for answers anymore. I was fighting for the survival of our species. James and I had barely spoken since Victor's visit. I had never seen him so shaken, so broken. He had been a skeptic, but now, he was a man on the verge of panic. The Guardians had already taken their position. They were watching us, guiding us, controlling the narrative. And I could feel the tension in the air. The world was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable. I sat in the quiet of my office, surrounded by the evidence. The maps, the symbols, the texts, all of it pointing toward the same conclusion. The architects weren't just coming back to help us. They were coming back to reclaim what they had started. And this time, they weren't going to leave us to our own devices. This time, they would take control. The decision before me was clear: accept their return or resist it. The problem was that there was no clear answer. On one hand, the architects offered knowledge, technology, peace. On the other, they were an unknown force, an alien intelligence that had shaped our very existence. But at what cost? What would humanity become if we let them take control again? I glanced at James, who had been pacing the room for hours. His face was drawn, his eyes haunted. He had been a part of this search, a partner in the investigation, but now, he seemed like a shell of the man he once was. He had seen the return of the architects as inevitable, an act of fate that could not be avoided. But I didn't see it that way. I couldn't. We need to prepare, I said, breaking the silence that had settled between us. We need to prepare for the return. We need to know everything we can about them, what they want, why they left, why they're coming back. James stopped pacing and looked at me, his expression torn. Emily, I don't think we can stop this. I think we're too late. We should have never dug this deep. The architects, whatever they are, they don't want to guide us anymore. They want to take control. And if they come back, there's nothing we can do to stop it. I stood up from my desk, my heart pounding with a mix of determination and fear. Then what? Do we just give up? Do we let them come back and reshape everything we've built? What about humanity? What about our freedom? James met my gaze, his eyes filled with sadness. I don't know if we have a choice anymore. If the architects are truly coming back, there's no way to stop them. The Guardians are already working with them. There's too much at stake. I could feel the despair in his voice, but I refused to give in. I couldn't. There had to be a way to resist. There had to be a way to protect humanity's future. We have to fight, I said, my voice steady despite the doubt that lingered in my mind. We can't just let them take over again. We have to find a way to prove that humanity can stand on its own, that we can make our own choices, even if it means facing the architects. James looked at me, his face clouded with uncertainty. And how are we supposed to do that? We're just two people, Emily. Against an alien race that's far more advanced than anything we've ever seen. I knew the odds were against us, but I couldn't let that stop me. We start by telling the world the truth. We expose the architects, expose the Guardians. We make sure everyone knows what's coming. We don't let them control us, not without a fight. The door to my office opened suddenly, and I turned to see Dr. Mitchell standing in the doorway. His face was grave, his eyes filled with worry. I think it's time we make our move, he said, his voice low. The architects won't wait much longer. If we don't act soon, they'll take control before we even have a chance to fight. I nodded, my resolve hardening. The time for waiting was over. If humanity was going to stand a chance, we had to unite. We had to take a stand before the architect's return was upon us. Where do we start? I asked, looking at both James and Dr. Mitchell. Dr. Mitchell hesitated for a moment, then reached into his bag and pulled out a small device. This is an encryption key I've been working on. It's designed to bypass the Guardian surveillance network. If we can get it to the right people, we might be able to broadcast the truth to the world. I took the device, feeling the weight of it in my hand. It was our last hope, the only way to expose the architect's plan before it was too late. We do this together, I said, looking at both men. No matter the outcome. We fight for the truth, for humanity's future. James nodded, a reluctant but firm resolve in his eyes. Together. And in that moment I knew we were all in this for the same reason, because the world had to know what was coming. And because we had to give humanity the chance to choose for itself. The world was holding its breath, and I could feel it. The truth was out, broadcast to every corner of the globe. Our message was clear: the architects, the beings who had shaped human civilization from the shadows, were returning. The question was no longer whether we believed it. The question was whether we could resist them, whether humanity could stand firm against their influence. In the days following the broadcast, there was a palpable sense of chaos in the air. Governments scrambled to respond, but there was no consensus. Some hailed the architects as saviors, the bringers of knowledge and peace. Others, like us, saw them for what they truly were, masters who had never let us truly be free. The Guardians, ever vigilant, moved to suppress the truth, hiding behind their secrecy and influence. But for the first time, people knew. People saw the architects for what they were. The response wasn't uniform. There were riots in some cities, protests in others. People were scared. They didn't know what to believe, or what to expect. And amidst it all, we prepared for the return. James, Dr. Mitchell, and I stood at the edge of the desert, overlooking the ancient ruins that had once been the cradle of humanity's greatest civilizations. The sky above was clear, but there was an energy in the air, a tension that I could feel in my bones. The architects were coming. We've done all we can, James said, his voice hoarse. The world knows the truth. Now it's up to them. It's out of our hands. I glanced at him, my heart heavy with the weight of our choices. We couldn't stop them, James. But we gave humanity the chance to decide. We gave them a choice. Dr. Mitchell stepped forward, holding a tablet that displayed the encrypted signal we had sent to the world. It's not enough to expose the truth, he said, his voice steady but uncertain. The architects may have given us the tools to build great civilizations, but we also need to prove that we can survive on our own. We need to show that we're not just their creation, their experiment. We need to show them that we can make our own decisions. I took a deep breath, the desert air filling my lungs. The sound of the wind rustling through the ruins seemed to echo my thoughts. This was it. This was the moment when humanity would either rise to meet the architects as equals, or fall into submission once again. And I wasn't sure which choice they would make. Suddenly, a strange hum filled the air, a low, resonant sound that seemed to vibrate through the ground beneath our feet. It was coming from the sky. My heart skipped a beat as I turned to look. A massive ship, no, not a ship, but something far beyond human technology, descended from the sky. Its surface was smooth, metallic, reflecting the sunlight in strange patterns. It wasn't like anything I had ever seen before. It was as if the ship itself was alive, pulsating with an otherworldly energy. I felt my breath catch in my throat. The architects were here. The ground trembled as the ship touched down. And then they emerged, tall, ethereal beings, their forms bathed in light. They were beautiful, terrifying, and impossibly advanced. Their eyes glowed with an intelligence that far surpassed anything human. They looked at us, at the world, with an unreadable expression. And then one of them spoke. "We have returned." The architect's voice echoed in my mind. "Humanity has been given a choice. To join us in the new age, or to reject our guidance and face the consequences." A hush fell over the desert. I looked at James, at Dr. Mitchell, and I could see the fear in their eyes. The choice was ours to make. The architects wanted our submission, our acceptance. They offered knowledge, peace, and power. But at what cost? I stepped forward, my voice clear though my heart raced. "We accept your knowledge, your guidance, but we will not be your subjects. Humanity chooses its own destiny. We are not your tools." The architect's gaze seemed to soften, as if they understood. "You have chosen the path of independence. It will not be easy, but your world will survive." And with that, the architects began to ascend, leaving behind their message, their choice. They did not leave us with domination. They did not force their will upon us. They left us with the knowledge that we were free, free to choose our own future, free to face the challenges that lay ahead. As their ship disappeared into the sky, I felt a strange calm wash over me. We had made our choice. Humanity had chosen independence, and now, it was up to us to prove that we were capable of forging our own future. The world would never be the same. But it was ours. And as I turned to face James and Dr. Mitchell, I knew that, no matter what came next, we had done something no one else had ever done before. We had chosen to stand on our own 2 feet, to face the unknown, and to embrace our future with open eyes. I had always been fascinated by black holes, these enigmatic regions of space where time and reality seemed to collapse into an endless void. But when I first saw the data, it shook me in a way I wasn't prepared for. The anomalies we were detecting at the event horizon of a distant black hole weren't just strange. They defied everything we knew about the laws of physics. And when I ran the numbers again and again, the results didn't change. The data was real, and it was asking a question we weren't ready to answer. I remember the moment clearly. Sitting in the dimly lit lab, the hum of the cooling system in the background, the smell of stale coffee and metal that had accumulated over long, sleepless nights. The team had been collecting data from a black hole in the Sagittarius A** region for months. But it wasn't until I looked at the patterns in the event horizon, patterns that shouldn't have been there, that I realized something was wrong. The readings were fluctuating in ways that no known phenomenon could account for. It felt like the universe was trying to tell us something. At first, I thought it was a glitch. Maybe a problem with our sensors. But the more I investigated, the clearer it became that we were dealing with something much larger than a malfunction. The fluctuations were too precise, too organized. I ran a simulation, and the result was chilling. The black hole wasn't just absorbing matter, it was sending something out, something from beyond the known universe. I kept the discovery to myself at first. There was no way I could share this with the team. They wouldn't understand. I wasn't even sure I understood it myself. But the more I looked into the data, the more I became certain that this was no ordinary anomaly. It was like a message, a warning, hidden within the very fabric of space. That's when I found it. Buried deep within a corner of the university's restricted archives, I stumbled upon an ancient manuscript. It was a dusty old thing, filled with bizarre symbols and strange diagrams. I almost didn't pick it up. But something about it felt significant. As I leafed through the pages, I saw familiar equations, ones I had seen in the data from the black hole, but they were presented differently, linked to something far older, something more cosmic. The manuscript spoke of a civilization, ancient and long forgotten, who had mastered the power of black holes. They used them not just for travel or energy but to manipulate the very fabric of reality itself. I felt a chill run down my spine. Could this be the key? Could these ancient people have discovered something about the universe that we had only just begun to scratch the surface of? The possibilities seemed endless and terrifying. I took the manuscript back to my apartment, scanning its pages late into the night. The more I read, the more my skepticism turned to fear. These people, whoever they were, had found a way to control black holes. And the more they experimented, the more the universe began to unravel. The text spoke of cataclysmic events that resulted from their meddling with time and space, events that could tear the very fabric of existence apart. I couldn't shake the feeling that what we had uncovered wasn't just a scientific breakthrough. It was a warning. I had no idea who these people were, or if they were even real, but their message was clear. Black holes were not just natural phenomena. They were tools that could change everything. And if we weren't careful, we could destroy everything. I put the manuscript down and stared at the data again. It felt like the walls of the room were closing in, like I wasn't just studying cosmic phenomena anymore. I was looking into the heart of something far darker, something that could unravel the entire universe. But who was I to stop it? I was just a scientist, a small part of a much larger machine. Yet, somehow, I knew this discovery wasn't just mine to make, it was mine to finish. I clicked on the data one last time, trying to understand what it was telling me. The screen blinked, and then a new set of coordinates appeared. They led to a black hole that hadn't been studied before, a place so far out in space that it was invisible to all but the most advanced telescopes. It was as if the universe itself was inviting me to follow it. And I didn't know whether that was an opportunity or a trap. I couldn't sleep that night. The manuscript lay on the desk, its strange symbols swirling in my mind. My eyes kept drifting back to the coordinates on the screen, the black hole that was now haunting my thoughts. It felt like the universe was tugging at me, urging me to explore it, to follow the thread that had already begun to unravel. But the more I thought about it, the more questions arose. Why hadn't anyone discovered this black hole before? Was it hidden on purpose, or was it so far out in the depths of space that it had remained undetected? And what if the coordinates weren't just a fluke? What if they led to something more? I had to find out. But I couldn't do it alone. I needed the team. The next morning, I called a meeting with Dr. Rachel Voss, my colleague and longtime friend. Her expertise in astrophysical simulations was invaluable, and if anyone could help make sense of the data, it was her. When I told her about the coordinates and the manuscript, she was immediately intrigued, but cautious. "Elias, this could be dangerous. We don't know what we're dealing with here," she said, her eyes narrowing as she stared at the screen. "I know," I replied, my voice betraying the unease I felt. "But if this is real, if we're looking at something that could change the laws of physics, then we have to investigate. The universe is on the brink of something, Rachel. We can't ignore it." Reluctantly, Rachel agreed. We spent the next few days running simulations, analyzing the coordinates, and calculating the potential risks. But nothing prepared me for what we found. The black hole wasn't just a random anomaly. It was connected to a network of other black holes, all with similar fluctuations in their gravitational fields. It was as though they were linked together by some invisible force, a force that no one had ever noticed before. And when we ran the simulations to track their connections, the data pointed to something even more unsettling: a pattern. A deliberate pattern. Something, or someone, was controlling these black holes. It was as if they were being used as gateways to something far beyond our understanding. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Black holes weren't supposed to be tools. They were cosmic remnants of stars that had collapsed in on themselves. But this was different. I couldn't shake the thought that someone, or something, had been manipulating the universe from behind the scenes for eons. I pulled Rachel aside, my mind racing. What if this isn't just an accidental alignment of black holes? What if they're being used for something? Something bigger than we can imagine? Rachel looked at me, her face pale. "Elias, you're starting to sound like you believe in some kind of conspiracy." I hesitated. The word felt strange on my tongue, but it was the only thing that made sense. The more we looked at the data, the more it became clear we weren't dealing with random cosmic events. We were dealing with a deliberate manipulation of space and time. The implications of this were staggering. Could it be possible that the universe was being controlled by some hidden force? A cosmic conspiracy? I needed to find out more, and I knew that the only way to do that was to get closer to the source. But just as I was about to make a decision, a strange message popped up on the screen. It was brief, just a series of numbers and letters, followed by a single sentence. "You are not supposed to know." My heart skipped a beat. The message wasn't from any known source. It was as if someone had deliberately sent it to me, to warn me off. But who would want to stop us from uncovering the truth? And why? I looked at Rachel, but she was already staring at the screen, her expression frozen in shock. The message was real. And it was meant for us. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. The message was clear. Someone didn't want us to continue our investigation. But now, more than ever, I had to know what lay behind the veil. The deeper I dug, the more dangerous this became. And I wasn't sure if I was ready for what was waiting for me. The message lingered on the screen like a curse, a silent warning that I couldn't escape. "You are not supposed to know." It felt like an omen. My mind kept circling back to those words, even as I tried to focus on the data in front of me. Whoever, or whatever, had sent that message wanted us to stop. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I couldn't stop. Not now. Rachel and I spent the next few days analyzing every bit of data we had. We had reached a point where we could no longer ignore the pattern that had emerged from the black holes. They weren't just linked by gravitational anomalies. They were positioned in a way that suggested deliberate manipulation. But who or what was behind it? I kept running simulations, hoping for some breakthrough, some clue that would explain the connections between the black holes. But every time I thought I had a breakthrough, the data led me down a different, more dangerous path. The numbers didn't lie. They told a story I wasn't sure I was ready to hear. It was then that Rachel stumbled across something in the archives, an obscure government report, dated from the 1970s, that mentioned an organization called the Black Hole Society. The name sounded like something from a science fiction novel, but as I read through the document, the implications were terrifying. The Black Hole Society wasn't just a research group, they were a secretive faction, composed of the world's most influential scientists, politicians, and military leaders. They had been experimenting with black holes long before we had even discovered the first one. The more I read, the more I realized that their experiments weren't just about studying the black holes. They were trying to control them, to use them as gateways to manipulate time and space. The report mentioned a project, codenamed Kronos, that aimed to harness the energy of black holes to create a new reality, one where they could control the flow of time itself. It was as if they were trying to rewrite the rules of the universe. The more I pieced together from the report, the clearer it became. The Black Hole Society had been operating in the shadows for decades, pulling strings and controlling the very fabric of reality. And they had no intention of letting anyone interfere with their plans. I felt the weight of this discovery bearing down on me. We weren't just dealing with a cosmic phenomenon anymore. We were up against a secret organization, one with the power to manipulate the universe itself. And now, they knew we were onto them. The worst part was that I couldn't even be sure who we could trust. Rachel had been my closest ally, but now, I wasn't so sure. She had been the one to find the report, but what if she had known about the Black Hole Society all along? What if she was part of it? My suspicions grew with each passing day. I couldn't shake the feeling that Rachel was hiding something from me. I had to confront her. Late one night, when the lab was empty and the silence hung heavy in the air, I asked her outright. "Rachel, are you involved with them? The Black Hole Society?" She looked at me, her face pale. "What are you talking about, Elias? I've seen the report. I know what they're trying to do," I said, my voice trembling with urgency. "I need to know if you're part of it. If you've been lying to me." Rachel stared at me for a long moment, her eyes hardening. Then, she did something that chilled me to the bone. She smiled. "You're getting too close, Elias," she said, her voice eerily calm. "You don't know what you're up against. They won't stop, not until they've rewritten everything." I could feel the tension in the room, thick and suffocating. In that moment, I knew she wasn't just an innocent bystander in all of this. She was part of something much larger, something that could change everything. But what exactly was Rachel involved in? And how far was she willing to go to protect the society's secrets? Rachel turned away from me, her eyes clouded with something I couldn't quite decipher. "You need to stop, Elias. You're not ready to know the truth." With that, she left the room without another word, leaving me with more questions than answers. I wasn't sure who I could trust anymore. But one thing was certain, Rachel had just given me a glimpse into the darkness that lay ahead, and I wasn't sure I could walk away from it. I couldn't shake the feeling that the walls were closing in. Ever since Rachel's unsettling warning, everything had started to spiral. It was as if the universe itself had conspired against me, leading me to discover secrets I wasn't ready to handle. But I couldn't back down now. Too much was at stake. The Black Hole Society had been pulling the strings for decades, shaping the course of history with their control over black holes, and I had stumbled into their web. But what did they want? Why were they manipulating the fabric of space and time? And more importantly, what was I going to do about it? I knew I couldn't do this alone. Rachel's words still echoed in my mind, and I couldn't trust her anymore. I had to find more information, and that meant going deeper into the archives, into the heart of the conspiracy. I spent the next few days combing through every available document, every scrap of research I could find, but the deeper I went, the more I realized that the Black Hole Society had left a trail of deception and misdirection. I wasn't the only one looking for answers. I reached out to Dr. Victor Caldwell, an old colleague from my time at the European Space Agency. He had always been a bit of a maverick in the scientific community, willing to dig into the stuff others preferred to ignore. He had a reputation for uncovering classified research, and I needed his help. "Victor, you've got to help me. There's something going on with the black holes. I need to know everything the Black Hole Society's been involved in," I said when we finally connected over a secure line. Victor was silent for a moment, as if weighing whether to speak or not. "You don't know what you're asking, Elias," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "The Society is beyond anything you can imagine. If you want to dig into this, you need to be ready for what you'll find." "I'm already in this too deep," I replied, my tone hardening. "I need the truth, Victor." There was a long pause. Finally, he spoke again. "All right, I'll send you something. But don't say I didn't warn you." The next day, a package arrived. It was a simple, unmarked envelope, but inside were files that made my stomach turn. The documents detailed secret experiments conducted by the Black Hole Society, many of which were conducted under the guise of academic research. But these weren't just normal scientific studies. These were experiments designed to test the limits of time itself, to stretch the boundaries of reality. They had been trying to manipulate the event horizon of black holes, using them to open rifts in time, to travel through different realities. As I read through the papers, a chill ran down my spine. The experiments were nothing short of madness. The Society had been trying to create a new timeline, one where they could rewrite history, where they could control the flow of time itself. It was as if they wanted to play God, to undo the mistakes of the past and reshape the future to fit their desires. But the most disturbing part was the report detailing the collapse of several test subjects, people who had been used as part of their experiments. The data showed that when these individuals were exposed to the manipulated black holes, they were either disintegrated or, worse, lost in time, trapped in a never-ending loop, unable to escape. It was as if the Society was experimenting with lives as if they were mere pawns in a twisted game. I had to know more. I had to find out how far the Society's reach went, and what they had done to cover their tracks. I began searching for connections between the Society and other powerful organizations, governments, corporations, anyone who might have had a hand in their experiments. The deeper I dug, the more I realized that the conspiracy stretched far beyond anything I had imagined. I discovered that the Society had been funding secret research in multiple countries, working with governments to harness black holes for military applications. They had created technology that could manipulate time on a local scale, slowing it down, speeding it up, even reversing it. It was beyond anything we had ever dreamed of in our wildest theories. But the most terrifying discovery was the evidence of their ultimate goal, to collapse time itself. They weren't just manipulating black holes for power. They were trying to rewrite the very laws of the universe. As I pieced together these findings, I realized something even darker. The Society wasn't working alone. They had allies, people in high places, people who had the power to hide the truth, to make it disappear. But who were they? And what was their endgame? Just as I was about to make a breakthrough, I received another message. This time, it wasn't a warning. It was an ultimatum. "Stop now, or we will stop you." The words were chilling. Whoever was behind this was watching my every move, and they wouldn't hesitate to silence me if I got too close to the truth. But I couldn't back down now. The universe was at stake, and I had no choice but to keep going. The real question was, who would make it out alive? I'd never felt more alone in my life. The files I'd uncovered, the threats I'd received, everything had begun to feel like a relentless tidal wave, pushing me further into a chasm of uncertainty. But still, I couldn't stop. There was something about this conspiracy, something about the Black Hole Society, that demanded the truth be unearthed. Every discovery pulled me deeper into the abyss, and no matter how many warning signs appeared, I couldn't turn back now. The message I had received, "Stop now, or we will stop you," wasn't just a warning. It was a declaration. Whoever was behind the Black Hole Society wasn't playing games. They had been watching me, waiting for the moment I got too close to the heart of the conspiracy. But I wasn't about to let fear control me. Not now. Not when the stakes were this high. I continued my research, knowing the risks. I was now convinced the society had more to lose than I had first thought. They weren't just meddling with black holes, they were playing with time itself, bending and twisting it to their will. And if they succeeded, the consequences could be catastrophic. Then, the breakthrough came. It was late one night, the lab eerily silent except for the hum of the computers. I had been running simulations again, trying to map out the connections between the black holes and their anomalies. But this time, something was different. As I inputted the latest batch of data, the screen flickered, and a new set of coordinates appeared. But these weren't just random numbers. They led to a hidden lab, a secret facility buried deep beneath the surface of the Earth. It took me a moment to realize the significance of what I had found. The coordinates were leading me to a location that had been erased from every official record. A place that didn't exist on any map. This was the Black Hole Society's secret heart, the place where their most dangerous experiments were being conducted. And I had just uncovered it. The feeling of dread that washed over me was indescribable. I was no longer just uncovering anomalies in space. I was about to enter the very heart of the conspiracy, and I had no idea what I would find. But there was no turning back. I shared the discovery with Rachel, though I had no idea if I could trust her anymore. But she had been my partner in this from the beginning, and despite the doubts that now clouded my judgment, I needed her help. "Rachel, I think I've found it. I know where they've been conducting the experiments. They've been hiding it all these years," I said, my voice barely a whisper. She didn't say anything at first. Then, after a long pause, she replied, her tone strangely calm. "I know." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "What do you mean, you know?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. Rachel turned to me, her eyes full of something I couldn't place. Guilt? Regret? "Elias, I've known about the society for years. I've been part of their operations, under the radar. But when I saw what they were capable of, I couldn't stand by anymore. That's why I warned you." I stared at her, shocked, my mind spinning. The woman I had trusted more than anyone in the world was one of them. She had been working with the society all along, and I had been too blind to see it. But there was no time for questions. We had to act. The facility I had discovered was too important, too dangerous to ignore. If the society was truly manipulating time, if they were on the verge of collapsing the very fabric of reality, then we needed to stop them, no matter what. We gathered what we could, documents, evidence, anything that could help us expose the society's twisted experiments, and made plans to infiltrate the facility. It wouldn't be easy. We were up against the most powerful and secretive organization in the world. But we couldn't let fear stop us. The universe was at stake, and we were running out of time. As we prepared to leave, a feeling of unease settled in my gut. It wasn't just the fear of the unknown, or the fear of what the society might do to us. It was something deeper. Something more primal. What if, by exposing them, we were only accelerating the collapse of everything? What if the society wasn't just playing with time, but was actually trying to stop it from unraveling? And worse, what if their experiments had already begun to cause irreversible damage? As we set out toward the facility, the gravity of our situation hit me like a tidal wave. The deeper we went, the more I realized that we might be too late to stop anything. What if we couldn't fix what had already been broken? And what if the truth was even worse than we could possibly imagine? The journey to the facility felt endless. As we drove through winding roads, the night grew darker, and I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on me. My mind kept racing through the countless discoveries we had made, the ancient manuscript, the black hole anomalies, the hidden message, and Rachel's betrayal. But now, the truth was within reach. We were getting closer to the heart of it all, and nothing about what lay ahead felt safe. I glanced over at Rachel. Her face was pale, a mix of guilt and determination written in every line. She hadn't spoken much since I confronted her about her involvement with the Black Hole Society, and I wasn't sure what to say either. But now wasn't the time for accusations. We had a job to do, and we were running out of time. As we approached the facility, my mind was flooded with questions. How long had the society been operating in secrecy? What exactly had they been doing with the black holes? And why had they allowed me, to get so close to uncovering their plans? Had they been waiting for this moment all along? The facility was buried deep beneath the earth, far from prying eyes, hidden away in a vast network of underground tunnels. The security surrounding it was unlike anything I had ever seen. We had to pass through multiple checkpoints, bypass high-tech surveillance, and sneak through dark hallways. But eventually, we reached the heart of the operation. What I found inside was nothing short of terrifying. The first room we entered looked like something out of a science fiction nightmare. Banks of computers hummed in the background, each one displaying complex equations and data streams related to black holes. But it wasn't just the technology that struck me, it was the sheer scale of it all. There were charts detailing black hole manipulation, data on time dilation, and photographs of twisted, distorted spaces that defied the laws of physics. I felt like I was standing on the edge of reality itself, staring into the unknown. And then I saw it, a massive, cylindrical structure in the center of the room. It was like a machine, but far more advanced than anything I had ever seen. The walls of the structure were lined with cables, and inside, the core of the machine was surrounded by a swirling vortex of light. It looked like a miniature black hole, pulsating with energy, its event horizons slowly twisting and bending the space around it. "This is it," Rachel whispered, her voice almost reverent. "This is the project they've been working on. The Kronos machine." I turned to her, feeling a chill spread down my spine. "Kronos?" She nodded, her face hardening. "It's the Society's ultimate goal. They've been trying to manipulate time, to control it, to stop it from unraveling. This machine, it's their way of rewriting history." The revelation hit me like a ton of bricks. The Kronos machine wasn't just about studying black holes. It was about manipulating the very fabric of time itself. The Society had been using their knowledge of black holes to try and control reality, to reshape the past and future to suit their own desires. I felt my stomach churn as I thought about the implications. If they succeeded, the world as we knew it would be gone. Time would be their plaything, and the consequences would be catastrophic. No one would be safe. Rachel seemed to sense my hesitation. She placed a hand on my shoulder, her grip tight. "We need to shut it down, Elias. If we don't, it's not just our future that's at risk, it's the entire universe." But even as she spoke, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were too late. The machine had already been activated. We could already feel the effects. The very air around us seemed to hum with energy, like the space itself was being torn apart. Suddenly, the room flickered. The lights dimmed for a moment before flickering back to life. A low, rumbling sound began to echo through the facility, like a distant thunderstorm. "Elias," Rachel said urgently, "we need to act now. We don't have much time." I nodded, swallowing hard. We couldn't let this go any further. But as I turned to the console to access the machine's control panel, I froze. The screen in front of me flashed a message, one that I had feared would come. It was from the Black Hole Society. "The experiment is irreversible. You cannot stop it now." My blood ran cold. It was as if they had been waiting for this moment. Waiting for us to come this far. Waiting for us to reach the point where it was too late to stop them. And then, a voice echoed through the speakers in the room. It wasn't Rachel's. It wasn't anyone I recognized. It was calm, chillingly so, and it sent a shiver down my spine. "You've come this far, Elias," the voice said. "But you are too late. The timeline is already collapsing. The universe as you know it is ending. I felt a wave of dread wash over me. The Chronos machine had already started the process. We were no longer just dealing with black holes. We were dealing with the end of time itself. Before I could respond, the room shook violently, and the lights flickered again. A high-pitched whine filled the air, like the universe itself was groaning in pain. The event horizon in the center of the machine began to spin faster, pulling the room into a chaotic vortex. There was no time left. The countdown had already begun. The rumbling in the facility intensified, and I could feel the air vibrating with a strange energy, as if the very building were alive, caught in the grip of the Chronos machine. I looked around, searching for a way to stop it, but everything seemed futile. The machine was already in motion, and the voice, that cold, calculating voice, echoed in my head. You cannot stop it now. But it wasn't just the machine that made my heart race. It was the realization that Rachel had known all along. The truth she had kept from me. As the vibrations in the room grew stronger, I couldn't help but turn to her, my mind swirling with 1,000 thoughts. Why, Rachel? My voice cracked, and I hated how weak it sounded. Why didn't you tell me? You knew about the society, didn't you? You knew what they were doing, and you chose to help them. How long, Rachel? How long have you been working with them? She looked at me, her face hard and unreadable. For a moment, I thought she was going to deny it. But then she took a deep breath, her eyes meeting mine with a kind of sorrow that made my stomach turn. I tried to warn you, Elias. I really did, she said quietly, her voice tinged with regret. But you don't understand. They weren't just manipulating black holes, they were saving us. The world, the universe, it's all breaking apart. Time itself is unstable. The Chronos machine is the only way to fix it. I stepped back, my mind reeling. Fix it? You think playing with time, rewriting history, is going to fix anything? I could feel my pulse quicken, the panic rising within me. Rachel, the timeline is already collapsing. The damage has already been done. You've been part of this madness, and you still think it's going to save us? She didn't answer right away, her eyes flicking nervously toward the machine in the center of the room. I could see the struggle in her face, the conflict between what she had been taught to believe and the harsh reality that was now unfolding before us. They told me it was the only way, she said softly. They told me the universe was dying, and this was the only solution. I believed them, Elias. I had to. I didn't want to. Her voice faltered, and she quickly wiped away a tear, the first sign of emotion I had seen from her in days. But now I see it. I see how wrong they were. And I see how wrong I was. I shook my head, not knowing what to feel. Anger, betrayal, sorrow, all of it mixed together in a bitter knot in my chest. Rachel had been my partner, my closest ally in all of this. And now, she was telling me that she had willingly walked down this dark path, believing that rewriting the timeline was the answer. Then why are we still here? I demanded, my voice rising with frustration. Why didn't you stop it? You're telling me you knew how dangerous this was, but you let it happen. You let them do this to the universe. She looked at me, her expression resigned. I couldn't stop it. Not alone. I tried to warn you, Elias, but they have too much control. Too much power. She paused, glancing toward the machine. And now, it's too late. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. We were standing on the edge of the end of everything, and the woman I had trusted, the woman who had been by my side, was part of the very force that was tearing the universe apart. The Chronos machine, the black hole society, it was all tied together in ways I had never fully understood. And Rachel had been an unwilling pawn in their game. But I couldn't just let her walk away from this. I couldn't let her believe that this was the end, that we were helpless to stop it. We're not finished yet, I said, my voice hard with determination. There has to be a way to shut this down. There has to be a way to fix this before the timeline collapses entirely. I don't care if you help them or not. We're in this together now. I'm not going to let the universe end because of a mistake. Rachel nodded slowly, the weight of my words sinking in. You're right, she said, her voice tinged with fear and regret. I've made mistakes, Elias. But I'll help you. I'll do whatever it takes to stop this, even if it costs me everything. I didn't know if I could ever forgive her for what she had done, but that didn't matter now. What mattered was stopping the Chronos machine and saving the universe from collapse. As we moved toward the control panel, the vibrations grew stronger. The event horizon at the heart of the machine flickered, its energy surging uncontrollably. We had no time left. Rachel and I stared at the control panel, the countdown on the screen ticking down faster than I could process. The machine was already near the point of no return. But just as I reached for the control, the voice echoed again, this time colder and more threatening. You cannot stop it. Time is beyond your control now. I hesitated. Was the machine already beyond saving? Had we come too late? Or was there still a chance to stop it before it was too late for everything? The hum of the Chronos machine was deafening now. The room felt like it was vibrating with the sheer power of it, the walls trembling as if the very building were buckling under the strain. I could feel the energy pulsing in the air, thick and oppressive, pressing down on me, on everything. The countdown on the screen loomed large, ticking down mercilessly. It was a ticking clock that carried the weight of the universe on its shoulders. Rachel, we have to stop it now! My voice was tight with panic, but I didn't know what else to say. I didn't know how to fix this. How to undo the damage that had already been done. The event horizon at the center of the machine was spinning wildly, the swirling vortex distorting the air, creating ripples in the space around it. Time itself felt warped, as though it was no longer flowing properly. The universe was becoming unmoored. Rachel and I both stood frozen for a moment, staring at the countdown. The final moments were approaching, and the weight of everything that had happened, everything we had uncovered, was crashing down on us. We don't have time to second-guess this, Elias! Rachel snapped, her eyes wild with desperation. We can't just turn it off like a light switch. This machine has been running for years. It's already destabilizing everything. Time is breaking down. The longer we wait, the harder it will be to fix. I nodded, though I felt a knot of fear tightening in my chest. My thoughts raced, but they felt slow, sluggish, like I was wading through treacle. The implications of everything, the black holes, the manipulation of time, the Chronos machine itself, felt so huge, so incomprehensible, that I wasn't sure how to fight it. Could we even fix this? Was there a chance, or were we already too late? Rachel reached out and grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the console. Her hands were shaking, but her resolve was clear. She was the one who had known about all of this, the one who had been part of it, but now, in this moment, she was with me. We were in this together. For better or worse. Stop doubting, she said, her voice fierce, almost angry. We've come this far. We know what the society's been trying to do. We know they've been trying to control time, to reshape reality. But they've lost control. That's why we're here. This machine, it's a bomb. And if we don't deactivate it, it'll destroy the very fabric of the universe. We're out of options. We have to act now. I could feel her words sinking in. She was right. This wasn't just about stopping a scientific experiment anymore. It was about saving everything. The universe was unraveling in front of our eyes, and there was no way to predict what would happen if we let it continue. The countdown was down to the final 30 seconds, and the intensity of the machine's energy was becoming unbearable. I could feel the heat radiating from the core, and the air around us seemed to distort, as if the room itself was being pulled into the event horizon. Without thinking, I slammed my hand onto the control panel, trying to access the shutdown sequence. But the machine resisted. The console flickered, sparking with electricity, as if it was fighting me, refusing to let go of its hold on the universe. "Come on!" I gritted my teeth, hitting the buttons with frantic urgency. "Come on, come on!" Rachel was beside me, her hand pressed to the panel, trying to access the emergency override. "There has to be a fail-safe," she said, her voice shaking with fear. "They've designed this thing to be foolproof. We just need to find the code, the key to shutting it down." I felt a pang of frustration, of helplessness. How were we supposed to stop something so complex, something that had been built to transcend time itself? It wasn't just technology we were fighting, it was something far greater. It was a force we couldn't control. The countdown was now at 10 seconds. My heart pounded in my chest, and I felt my breath quicken. This was it. If we didn't stop it now, the universe, the entire fabric of reality, would collapse. Time itself would be rewritten, destroyed. And we'd be left with nothing. Then, in the chaos, something shifted. The console flashed. For a split second, I saw a sequence of numbers, a code hidden deep within the system, an access point that could override the machine's final sequence. It was barely visible, almost like a glitch in the system, but it was there. I reached for it, my fingers trembling as I typed in the code, praying that it was the right one. As the last digits hit the screen, I hit enter with all the strength I had left. The machine stuttered. The vortex at its core flicked, and then everything stopped. The countdown halted. Time itself seemed to hold its breath. But then, just as the room grew silent, a low, rumbling sound began again, coming from deep within the machine. It wasn't over. Not yet. The silence that followed the shutdown was suffocating. For a moment, everything seemed still, as if the universe itself were holding its breath. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the weight of what we had just done sinking in. We had stopped the countdown. We had saved the universe. At least, that's what I wanted to believe. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that we hadn't escaped unscathed. That the damage had already been done. I stood there, staring at the machine. The pulsating event horizon had stopped spinning, its chaotic energy contained. The lights above flickered, and for a brief second, I thought I saw something move in the corner of my vision. I turned sharply, but the room was empty, save for the flickering screens and the distant hum of the machine. What just happened?" Rachel's voice broke through the tension. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with disbelief. It wasn't just the shock of the shutdown, it was something else, something deeper. I didn't answer immediately. My mind was racing. I had seen something in the machine's final moments. A flash. A glimpse. It was almost as if the machine had shown me something beyond the here and now. Then I saw it again. The room around us seemed to ripple, like a film reel caught in a flicker. Time itself seemed to twist, distorting the air in waves. I grabbed onto the console to steady myself, feeling the ground beneath me shift. The air grew thick, heavy with the unmistakable sense of unease. And then it hit me. The machine hadn't just been a tool to manipulate time, it had been a bridge. A gateway. And it wasn't the black holes it had been connecting, it was us. It had connected us to the future. I turned to Rachel, my breath catching in my throat. "We've been too focused on the present, but this machine, it wasn't just manipulating the timeline. It was trying to show us something." Rachel stared at me, her eyes wide with confusion. "What are you talking about? We stopped the countdown, didn't we? We saved everything." But that's when it clicked. The machine wasn't just showing us the past or present. It was showing us the future, our future. I stepped back, my pulse quickening. The visions I had seen during the final moments of the shutdown, they weren't just random glitches. They were messages. From the future. The room around me began to distort further, and I realized that I wasn't just seeing flashes of images. I was seeing a version of myself, a future me. The figure that appeared before me wasn't an alien, or some otherworldly entity. It was me. But not the version of me I knew. This was a future version, a twisted, older version that had become something unrecognizable. His face was gaunt, eyes hollow, a shadow of the person I used to be. He wore the same expression I had seen in the mirror moments before, an expression of coldness, of resignation. "Elias," the future me said, his voice like a whisper, though his words echoed in my ears. "You don't understand yet, do you? The damage is done. The timeline has already been altered. What you think you've saved is a lie." I stumbled back, unable to look away from the figure. "No, this can't be happening. This isn't real." But the future version of me just smiled. A cruel, knowing smile. "It's already too late. You were never meant to stop the Chronos machine. You were always meant to come here. To see this. Why? Why show me this?" I asked, my voice shaking. His hollow eyes glinted. "Because you're already a part of this future, Elias. You're not just fighting the black hole society. You're fighting yourself. And in the end, you'll be the one to rewrite everything. Just like they did." Rachel grabbed my arm, pulling me back toward her. "Elias, what's happening? Who is that?" I couldn't answer her. I couldn't explain. I didn't understand it myself. The future version of me seemed to fade as the distortion around us grew. His voice, though, lingered. "The past, the present, and the future, they're all connected. What you've done, it's only a temporary fix. The universe will collapse again. The timeline will repeat. And this time, you will be the one to control it." The room around us began to blur, and the figure vanished, leaving me in stunned silence. The air felt thick with the weight of his words. I stood there, unable to process everything I had just seen. Rachel's grip on my arm tightened. "Elias, what happened? Who was that? What did he mean?" I didn't have an answer for her. The truth was, I wasn't sure if I could even trust myself anymore. The person I had been fighting, this future version of me, wasn't just a stranger. He was me. But a me I didn't recognize. A me who had become twisted by the very forces I had been trying to stop. And if what he said was true, if we hadn't fixed anything at all, then the universe wasn't saved. It was only a temporary reprieve. The real catastrophe was still coming. And this time, I would be the one to choose whether it would be stopped or controlled. The room seemed to collapse inward as the distortion began again, pulling us back into the vortex of the machine. I felt the cold grip of reality slipping away, as the timeline I thought I had saved began to fracture once more. The future was no longer a place of hope. It was a place I had already become. And now, the choice I had to make was not just about saving the universe. It was about deciding whether to rewrite it, once and for all. The room was collapsing around us. The event horizon at the heart of the Chronos machine flickered violently, its spinning vortex distorting the space around it. I could feel the pull of it, as if the very fabric of reality was being stretched to its limits. The universe was coming apart at the seams, and every moment we delayed only made it worse. "Rachel!" I shouted, my voice barely audible over the roar of the machine. "We have to stop it. Now!" But she was standing frozen, her eyes wide with fear as she stared at the screen. The countdown was long gone, replaced by something even more terrifying, a blinking message that read, "Time is no longer linear." The words echoed in my mind. What did that mean? If time wasn't linear, if it had already been altered, then we weren't just facing the collapse of the universe. We were facing the destruction of everything we understood about existence. The past, the present, and the future had already begun to blur, to fold into each other. There was no clear distinction anymore. We were stuck in a moment that was either now nor then. I turned back to the console, desperate for a solution. There had to be a way to reverse this, to undo the chaos we had unleashed. But the controls were no longer responding. The machine was too far gone. The universe was already tearing itself apart. Rachel stepped forward, her face a mask of resolve. Elias, we've been through this before. We can't stop it. Not now. We've already set things in motion. The collapse is happening. No, I snapped, my voice raw. We can fix this. We have to. But deep down, I knew she was right. The timeline had already been shattered. We had done what we could, but it wasn't enough. The damage was irreversible. And then I remembered the words of my future self, the twisted version of me who had appeared in the machine. You were never meant to stop the Chronos machine. You were always meant to come here. To see this. The universe wasn't just collapsing, it was reshaping itself. The paradox we had triggered wasn't just about the end of everything. It was about a new beginning. I looked at Rachel, her face pale with fear and confusion. She had been a part of this, part of the cause of this cosmic unraveling. But now, she was as much a victim as I was. We had both been caught in the web of the black hole society, and despite our best efforts, we hadn't been able to stop it. A final, horrifying realization hit me. The universe wasn't ending. It was transforming. The society hadn't just been manipulating black holes, they had been trying to control the very nature of existence itself. And in the process, they had caused the universe to collapse into a singularity, a moment where everything ceased to exist as we knew it. But even as I thought this, a flicker of hope remained. The machine's control panel, though failing, still showed a faint pulse of activity. The event horizon in the center of the room began to stabilize, its spinning slowing down. Could it be? Was there still a chance to reverse it? Could we restore the timeline? Rachel stepped up beside me. Elias, we don't have to do this anymore. We don't have to try and fix it. Maybe this is how it was always meant to be. Maybe it's time for everything to end. I shook my head, my heart pounding. No. We can't give up. Not after everything. I looked back at the machine, at the faint pulse of energy still emanating from it. There had to be something we could do. Something to reverse the damage and give the universe a chance to heal. But as I stood there, staring at the flickering lights, I realized that the real choice wasn't whether we could save the universe. It was whether we could live with the consequences of what we had done. I reached forward, pressing my hand to the console. My mind raced, piecing together the information we had gathered. The society had wanted to rewrite time, to control it. But in the end, they hadn't understood the fundamental truth. Time couldn't be controlled. It couldn't be played with like a tool. It was a force, as unpredictable and destructive as a black hole itself. Suddenly, the machine responded. The lights flickered once more, and I could feel the gravitational pull of the event horizon growing stronger, threatening to pull us in. But this time, I wasn't afraid. This time, I knew what had to be done. I turned to Rachel, my voice steady. It's time to let go. Without waiting for a response, I activated the final override. The machine trembled as it began to unravel the very fabric of time. The room seemed to disappear, consumed by the darkness of the collapsing event horizon. I felt my body being pulled toward it, but instead of fear, I felt peace. The universe was ending, but in its place, something new would be born. The timeline would reset. The mistakes of the past would be undone. And then, everything went dark. I thought I had everything figured out. I was a government agent. Intelligence, tactics, and operations were my life. I wasn't just any agent. I was a part of a specialized division that dealt with things most people couldn't even imagine. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a job, and I did it well. But that was before I stumbled on something I wasn't supposed to see. It started out like any other day. I was heading into the office, my usual routine, grab coffee from the shop on the corner, walk through the front door of the agency, and punch in. My phone buzzed with a message as soon as I sat down at my desk. It was from Sarah, a name I hadn't seen in months. She was a fellow agent I'd worked with on a few high-stakes missions back in the day. I never thought much of it until I read the message. "You need to see this. Don't trust anyone." Curious, I opened the file she sent. It was a list of encrypted documents. I knew exactly what it was before the first page loaded, something I wasn't supposed to have access to. My heart started racing, but I pushed it aside. It wasn't the first time I had gotten my hands on classified material, but this was different. The first document detailed something called Project Subjugation. The name alone was enough to make my stomach twist. It was a covert government initiative, something buried deep, covered up by the highest authorities. The report described an experimental mind control program, one that had been testing on unwitting civilians for years. It didn't make sense at first. Why would the government need to use mind control technology? What was the point of brainwashing people? But then I remembered all those strange, unexplainable events I had witnessed during my time with the agency. People acting strangely, behaving out of character, and then, like a light switching off, they'd go back to normal. I thought back to a few missions I had been part of, assignments where I was told to observe certain individuals, make sure they stayed quiet, or simply disappear from public view. But at the time, I never questioned the orders. Now, it all started to fit together. I had been part of something that was far darker than I ever imagined. I didn't know who to trust anymore, not even my closest friends. But Sarah had been in this world too. She had to have known something more. I reached out to her, and the response came quickly. "Meet me. Same place we used to." Now, I didn't waste any time. I grabbed my jacket, slipped the encrypted files into my bag, and left. The streets outside were familiar, busy with commuters going about their usual routines. No one knew what was really happening. No one could. It wasn't safe. As I made my way to the meetup point, my mind raced through everything I had seen, everything that didn't add up. Why had Sarah reached out now? What had she discovered? What did she know? At the corner of a rundown diner, I found her waiting. She didn't look surprised to see me. It was like she knew I'd come, knew I'd finally put the pieces together. But when I saw her face, something was wrong. Her eyes were tense, guarded. She didn't even give me a chance to speak. She pulled out a piece of paper from her jacket and slid it across the table. "You've got to see this," she said, her voice low. "It's not just mind control, Alex. It's worse. The government is creating a new world order, one where they control everything, the population, the economy, even our thoughts. And you've been part of it." My blood ran cold. The paper was another document, one that made my heart drop into my stomach. It was a blueprint of Project Subjugation, detailing the timeline, the experiments, and the next phase of the program. My name was on the list. I wasn't just an observer. I had been involved unknowingly in testing the very technology designed to manipulate people's minds. I couldn't breathe. I had always followed orders, always believed in the system. But this was something else entirely. I had been a pawn, and now I had to figure out how deep the rabbit hole really went. "I'm in," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "But we need to act fast. If they're already using this technology on people, there's no telling who's been affected." Sarah nodded grimly. "It's too late for most of them. But not for you. You can help us stop it." And just like that, everything changed. My world, my beliefs, my sense of purpose, it all shattered. I wasn't just fighting against the government anymore. I was fighting for my own mind. The meeting with Sarah didn't go as planned. In fact, nothing about this whole mess had gone as I'd expected. After I agreed to help, We spent the next few days piecing together whatever fragments of information we could find. But the more we dug, the more confusing it all became. It felt like we were always one step behind, always just missing the crucial piece that would make everything fall into place. The breakthrough came in an unlikely way, through an old contact of mine named James. He had been a fellow agent during my days in the field, a good guy with a family, always the kind to follow the rules and get the job done. When I called him, I didn't know what to expect. He had been out of the loop for years, and I assumed he was as clean as the rest of us. But as soon as I told him about Project Subjugation, there was no going back. "Meet me at the old warehouse by the docks," he said, his voice shaky. "I'll give you something you need to see. But you've got to come alone." I wasn't about to argue. I needed answers, and James was one of the few people who might have them. The warehouse wasn't far from where I was staying, so I made my way there just after dark. As I approached the rusted metal building, I felt the familiar rush of adrenaline, an old instinct kicking in. Was I ready for what was about to unfold? Or was I just another piece in their twisted game? James was waiting by the door when I arrived. He didn't even look at me as I approached, his eyes fixed on the ground. Something wasn't right, and it hit me immediately. "You okay, James?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He looked up at me for a moment, but his expression was cold, distant. "You don't know what you're getting into, Alex," he said, shaking his head slowly. "You think you can just wake up and fight back? They're everywhere, Alex. They're watching you right now." My stomach dropped, and I knew he wasn't talking about the government anymore. He was talking about the technology, the mind-controlled devices they were using to infiltrate every part of society. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about keeping people under control. It was about total domination. He handed me a small, weathered folder, the kind you'd expect to see in a government office. I took it without hesitation, and when I opened it, I saw several pieces of information that made my blood run cold. There were reports, photos, and most chilling of all, a list of names. Names I recognized. People I had worked with, people I had trusted. All marked as subjects. These were the individuals who had been experimented on, used as guinea pigs for the mind control project. The most terrifying part: they weren't just random civilians. These were former agents, people like me, who had unknowingly been implanted with the same technology. "How far does this go, James?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "How many of us are there?" James didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled out a piece of paper, a map, and placed it in front of me. The map detailed the locations of several facilities spread out across the country. But these weren't just ordinary facilities. They were bunkers, black sites, places hidden from the public eye. As I studied the map, I felt something shift in my gut. It wasn't just a few isolated incidents. It was a network, a web of operations that had been going on for years. "You've got to stop them, Alex," James said, his voice urgent. "If you don't, there won't be anyone left to fight. They've already started using the technology on high-level officials, politicians. It's everywhere. You don't even know who's real anymore." I stood there, frozen. The weight of it hit me harder than I expected. This wasn't just about exposing a few corrupt officials or cleaning up a few dirty secrets. This was a global operation, one that reached into every corner of society. And the scariest part? The people behind it were still out there, watching us. Before I could say anything else, James grabbed my arm. "Get out of here," he hissed. "They'll be here any minute. You've got the information now. Don't waste it." I didn't argue. I bolted from the warehouse, my heart pounding. My mind was racing, spinning with everything I had just learned. The conspiracy was bigger than I could have ever imagined. And if I wasn't careful, I could be next. I had never felt more exposed in my life. The closer I got to the truth, the more I realized just how deep this went. The documents from the warehouse, the names, the locations, it all pointed to something much bigger than I had imagined. But what really chilled me was the realization that it wasn't just a rogue government faction running the show. There were other players involved, and they were far more powerful than I had initially believed. Sarah and I had spent the next few days poring over everything we had, trying to make sense of the chaos. There was one thing that kept coming up in every piece of evidence: a shadowy organization known only as the Circle. Whoever they weren't just helping with the mind control project, they were running it. The government may have been the front, but the Circle was the real power behind the scenes. I first heard about them from a contact of Sarah's, an informant who had worked for one of the corporations involved in the project. He refused to meet us face to face, opting instead to send a cryptic message through a burner phone. His words were blunt. "The Circle controls everything. They pull the strings, and the government just follows orders." At first, I thought he was just paranoid. But after seeing the web of connections between politicians, business leaders, and military officials, it became impossible to deny. The Circle wasn't just a government operation. It was a global network that had infiltrated almost every institution, from corporations to military bases to world governments. They weren't just after control, they were after complete domination. As we dug deeper, we uncovered more about the Circle's origins. It was a cabal of powerful elites who had been manipulating world events for decades. The mind control program wasn't just about pacifying the population, it was about reshaping society to their will. They had a vision for the future, one where they controlled every aspect of life. From who people voted for to how they thought, the Circle had figured out how to control it all. And what terrified me most was how close they were to achieving their goal. I started to feel the weight of it all, like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing I could fall at any moment. Every time we got close to finding out more, the risk of getting caught increased. We weren't just dealing with corrupt officials anymore. The Circle had eyes and ears everywhere. And if we weren't careful, they'd make sure we disappeared without a trace. It was becoming clear that the conspiracy wasn't something we could just expose to the public. The Circle had the power to silence anyone who stood in their way, and they weren't afraid to use it. I started to question everything: the resistance, my own role in this, even my loyalty to the cause. Was I fighting for the right reasons? Or had I been drawn into something I didn't fully understand? But there was no turning back now. The more I learned, the more I realized that the Circle had no intention of stopping until they had reshaped the world into something unrecognizable. And I, along with Sarah and the rest of the resistance, had to stop them, no matter the cost. By now, I had learned that knowledge was the only weapon I had left. The deeper I dug into Project Subjugation, the more I uncovered. But with each discovery came new dangers. The Circle wasn't just an idea anymore. It was real, and they were watching us. It was no longer a matter of exposing them to the world. It was about survival. Sarah and I had been working non-stop, flipping through piles of stolen documents, hacking into servers, and calling in favors from old contacts. But with each new piece of information, it felt like we were just scratching the surface. We'd uncover a document, only to find it referenced 3 more we couldn't access. Every time we thought we had a lead, it turned out to be a dead end. The Circle was good at covering its tracks. They had people everywhere, and they made sure nothing leaked. One morning, I woke up to find a cryptic email waiting for me. No subject. No sender name, just a link. My first instinct was to ignore it. But I couldn't. I clicked on it, and a single message popped up. "You're looking in the wrong place." It was a threat, plain and simple. Someone knew we were getting too close to the truth, and they wanted to make sure we stopped before we went any further. But something about it didn't sit right with me. The Circle had been tight-lipped, operating in the shadows. Why would they make their presence known now? I immediately called Sarah, and she came over to the apartment. Together, we started combing through our files, looking for anything that could lead us to the next step. That's when we found it, a series of emails hidden in one of the databases we had hacked. At first, they seemed harmless, just routine communications between government officials and corporate leaders. But as we read through them, we found one that made my blood run cold. It was a detailed plan to implement mind control technology in the media. The idea was to use television broadcasts, social media, and even online streaming platforms to manipulate the thoughts and behaviors of the general population. They would start small, subtle messages embedded in ads, subliminal cues hidden in broadcasts. Over time, the population would be conditioned, slowly molded to fit the new world order. It was a chilling thought. What if everything we saw, everything we consumed, was already being filtered through their agenda? What if we were all already under their control, just without realizing it? But there was more. One email outlined a secret test site for the technology, a facility hidden in a remote location. It was described as a research facility, but the details didn't match up with anything in the official records. This wasn't just a government project. This was something bigger. It was an underground operation with ties to global corporations, and it was where the real work was being done. I knew we had to get there, but I also knew it wouldn't be easy. The Circle had made sure that everything they did was covered up, and they'd gone to great lengths to ensure their secrets stayed buried. But I couldn't back down now. We had the information. We had the proof. It was time to take action. The plan was simple: get to the facility, gather the evidence, and get out. No flashy moves, no distractions. Just in, get the data, and leave before we were noticed. But nothing was ever that easy. The plan was simple. At least, it seemed that way at the time. Sarah and I had managed to track down the location of the facility, a remote, highly guarded research complex tucked away in the hills. We gathered everything we thought we need: hacking tools, disguises, and a plan to get in and out without leaving a trace. What we didn't account for was the unexpected and deadly turn the mission would take. The facility looked like any other government research lab from the outside, stark, functional, and locked down tighter than Fort Knox. But as we made our way through the woods toward the entrance, I felt a deep unease settle in my gut. It wasn't just the guard towers or the razor wire fences. It was the weight of what we were about to uncover. I had seen pieces of the conspiracy, but I hadn't fully grasped the scale of it until now. We were about to break into the heart of something monstrous. We reached the perimeter under the cover of darkness, the sound of our footsteps muffled by the thick underbrush. Our hearts were pounding, but we pushed forward. Everything was riding on this. This was the moment we had been waiting for. We needed evidence, solid proof that the government and the Circle were using mind control technologies to manipulate not just civilians but world leaders, media figures, and possibly even military commands. I hacked into the security system and miraculously gained access to their network. The hard part was done. But as we moved deeper into the facility, we realized something wasn't right. The place was almost too quiet. There were no guards, no staff, and the rooms we passed seemed eerily sterile, as if they were never meant to be used. The further we went, the more we sensed we weren't alone. Then we found it, the lab. It was tucked away in the farthest corner of the facility, hidden behind layers of security and locked doors. As soon as I laid eyes on it, I knew we had reached the heart of the operation. The lab was massive, filled with rows of computers and high-tech equipment I couldn't even begin to understand. But it wasn't just the technology that stunned me. It was what we found in the back of the room. On the far wall, there were glass cases, dozens of them, each containing something I could only describe as human subjects. They weren't dead. But they weren't alive either. They were trapped in a state of suspended animation, their bodies hooked up to complex machines, their eyes wide open but unblinking. There were no screams, no cries for help. They were completely under the control of whatever technology the Circle had developed. It was the mind control program in its rawest, most terrifying form. I could feel the bile rise in my throat as I realized what I was looking at. These weren't just test subjects. They were people who had been erased, their memories wiped clean, they were broken. They were shells of human beings, existing only to serve the will of those who controlled them. And I knew, deep down, that I was not far from becoming one of them. It took everything I had not to break down. We weren't just dealing with a conspiracy anymore. This was a war, one that the Circle had already won in ways we couldn't even begin to fathom. And I had been a part of it. I had unknowingly contributed to their plans, helped carry out their missions, and now I was standing in the middle of their operation, staring at the consequences. The documents we found confirmed everything. The technology they were using wasn't just about controlling thoughts or pacifying people. It was about total subjugation. The mind-control devices were linked to a central network, one that could override the thoughts of anyone implanted with them. And it wasn't just for controlling civilians. No, the Circle had their sights set much higher. They had infiltrated political systems, military forces, and global corporations. They were using mind control to steer world events, manipulate economies, and create an entirely new social order. The revelation hit me like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just about taking control of a few minds here and there. This was a global takeover. And it was happening right under our noses. We were getting closer to the truth, but now I couldn't help but wonder, could we stop it? Could we even survive this? As I turned to Sarah, I saw the same fear in her eyes that I felt in my chest. We had what we needed. But now, the real question was, how far were we willing to go to expose it? The weight of what we had uncovered in that lab didn't hit me all at once. It was like a slow, suffocating pressure building inside me, little by little. But as the days went on, things started to spiral out of control. The resistance was falling apart, and I couldn't ignore the feeling that we were being watched. I had seen enough to know that we were on the brink of something far bigger than we could handle. But I hadn't prepared for the betrayal that would break us. It all started with a strange message, a quick text from an unknown number. The message was short, but it cut to the heart of everything. They know about you. They know everything. I didn't panic, not yet. But my gut told me it was time to pull back, to be more careful. The problem was, I couldn't tell if it was a threat from the government, or a warning from someone within the resistance. Every move we made seemed to come with a price, and trust was in short supply. I met with Sarah the next day, hoping for some clarity. She was as determined as ever, her face set in that familiar resolve. But there was something in her eyes, a hesitation, something I couldn't place. She didn't greet me with her usual confidence, and that threw me off more than I expected. We discussed our next steps, our plan to expose everything we'd found. But even as we spoke, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was holding something back. After we finished the meeting, I decided to check in with some of our other contacts. There was one, a man named Victor, who had been invaluable to us in getting the information from the underground networks. He was cautious, but he had always been reliable, until that night. I had planned to meet him at a safe house on the outskirts of the city. But when I arrived, the place was dark. No lights. No signs of life. Something wasn't right. I knocked, waited for a response, but there was nothing. I moved in cautiously. My hand was on my gun, instinct kicking in. The door creaked open, and that's when I saw it. Victor lying on the floor, his face pale, his eyes wide open but lifeless. There was a note beside him, written in hurried, scrawling handwriting. It said only, "They've compromised him. Don't trust anyone." I stood there for a long moment, my heart racing. Who could have done this? And more importantly, who could I trust now? I barely had time to process it before I heard footsteps behind me. I turned to find Sarah standing in the doorway, her face unreadable. The silence between us was thick, charged with an unspoken tension. "Victor's dead," I said, my voice hoarse. "Someone got to him." She didn't move, didn't show any emotion. "I know." That's when it hit me. I could see it now, the way she wasn't looking at me the same way, the way her words felt cold, rehearsed. Something was off, and it was in that moment that the gut-wrenching truth sank in. I had been played. "Sarah," I said slowly, taking a step back. "What's going on? Are you part of this?" Her face twisted in a mix of frustration and pity. "You've been too blind, Alex. Too eager to believe in the cause. The circle isn't just a government operation. It's a global system. And it doesn't matter who you are or where you're from. You're all just pieces in a bigger game. And I'm not going to let you ruin it." I couldn't believe it. Sarah, my ally, my only real friend in this fight, was a traitor. She had been playing both sides, feeding us false information, leading us down a path that would ultimately benefit the circle. I had trusted her, and now I realized just how much I had been manipulated. The realization came too late. Before I could react, she lunged at me, knocking me to the ground. We struggled for a moment, the fight raw and desperate. She was stronger than I had expected, but the shock of betrayal fueled my rage. I managed to break free, pushing her off and scrambling to my feet. "You'll regret this, Alex," she spat, wiping the blood from her lip. "You don't know how deep this goes. You don't know what they're capable of." I could hear the sirens in the distance, getting closer. I had no choice. With one last look at Sarah, I bolted, running through the back exit and into the streets. The city felt different now. The walls seemed to close in on me, and every shadow looked like an enemy. I didn't stop running. I couldn't. I didn't have the luxury of time anymore. Betrayed by Sarah and hunted by the circle, I was on my own now. The city seemed to close in around me, the streets blending into a blur as I tried to escape the constant surveillance. But there was no place left to hide. My only choice was to go deeper into the conspiracy, to understand it all, what they were doing, why they were doing it, and how far they'd already gone. I couldn't stop thinking about Victor's death. It wasn't just the betrayal of Sarah. It was everything that had led us here. The mind control project, the experiments, the people like me who had unknowingly been part of it all. The pieces were falling into place, but they weren't the kind of puzzle you want to solve. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how insidious the circle had become. This wasn't just about controlling a few minds. It wasn't even about manipulating governments. They were after something far greater, a complete overhaul of the entire social order. And the technology they had developed wasn't just limited to the mind-controlled devices we'd seen. That was just the beginning. The circle had unlocked the ability to manipulate not only thoughts but physical actions. The technology wasn't merely about pacifying people. It was about controlling their every move, their behavior, and even their impulses. They had created a system where the mind could be rewired, rewritten, and overwritten completely. I knew I had to dig deeper into the tech itself, find out who was behind it, how they developed it, and what else they had planned. That's when I reached out to someone I had avoided for a long time, Dr. Raymond Harris, a former scientist I had met during my time in the agency. He was brilliant, but he had always been a bit of a recluse, someone who seemed to disappear every time things started getting serious. But now, desperate for answers, I tracked him down. When I found him, he was exactly how I remembered him, slightly disheveled, a little paranoid, but his mind was still sharp. I showed him the files we had gathered, the pictures of the lab, the documents detailing the mind control program. His face grew pale as he flipped through them. "I've been working on this for years," he said, barely above a whisper. "The technology, everything you see here, this is just the tip of the iceberg. The circle, they've been experimenting with this for decades. But it's not just mind control. They've developed something far more dangerous. I was starting to realize just how deep the rabbit hole went. Dr. Harris explained that what we knew as mind control was only one application of a much larger scientific breakthrough. The technology they had developed wasn't just about controlling individual thoughts. It was about rewriting human biology itself, changing the way the brain processes emotions, impulses, and even memory. It was biological manipulation, done on a scale no one had ever thought possible. The devices implanted into people's brains weren't just passive tools, they were active, constantly transmitting and receiving data. They could be used to alter a person's perception of reality, making them believe things that weren't true or forget things they had once known. But it didn't stop there. The Circle's ultimate goal was to create a society where everyone was under their control, a society where free will was a thing of the past. The technology isn't just for controlling the masses, Dr. Harris continued. They're using it to create a new breed of human. One that's easier to control, easier to manipulate. They've started with politicians, military leaders, and high-ranking officials. But soon they'll move on to everyone else. I felt sick. The implications were overwhelming. They weren't just controlling people's minds. They were creating an entirely new reality, one where nothing was true and no one was truly free. But what can we do? I asked, my voice shaking. How can we stop them? Dr. Harris looked at me with a mix of fear and resignation. The only way to stop them is to destroy the technology. And that's not going to be easy. They've hidden it so well, integrated it into every aspect of society. The moment you try to take it down, they'll come after you. And they'll never stop until they've silenced everyone. I had been running for days, trying to stay one step ahead of the Circle. But now I understood the full scope of what we were up against. This wasn't just a fight against a corrupt government. This was a fight for the future of humanity. If we didn't stop the Circle, we were all doomed to live in a world where our thoughts, our actions, and our very identity could be controlled by someone else. And in that moment, I knew that no matter the cost, I had to take them down. I couldn't let them win. Not now, not ever. I had always believed in my ability to think for myself. I was a government agent, trained to follow my instincts, to trust my judgment. But everything I thought I knew was falling apart. As I tried to gather my thoughts, something gnawed at me, a sense of dread I couldn't shake. It wasn't just the fear of being hunted by the Circle. No, this was something more insidious. This was about losing control of myself. The technology they had developed wasn't just a way to manipulate others, it was in me too. And I hadn't even realized it. The device implanted in my brain was supposed to be a tool to enhance my efficiency as an agent, but it was much more than that. It was a leash, a way for them to pull my strings whenever they needed. I started noticing the glitches. Little things at first, a delay in my thoughts, a blank moment where I couldn't remember what I was doing. At first I thought it was just stress, too much time spent running from the Circle. But then it happened again, and this time, I couldn't ignore it. I was in the middle of talking to Sarah when I felt it, the wave of confusion that hit me out of nowhere. My words became jumbled, and for a split second, I couldn't remember what I was saying. It was like someone else was inside my head, rearranging my thoughts, controlling my actions. "Alex," Sarah said, her voice sharp. "What's wrong?" I looked at her, but it was like I was seeing her through a fog. I don't know. Something's not right. That's when it hit me. I wasn't just running from the Circle. I was a part of their experiment, their program. And the device they had implanted in me was still active. It wasn't just controlling my behavior, it was altering my memories, controlling my decisions, and clouding my judgment. I wasn't sure if I was acting on my own or if I was being manipulated. I needed to get the device out of my head. But how? And more importantly, who could I trust to help me do it? The answer came to me when I reached out to Dr. Harris. He had told me the technology could be undone, that there was a way to reverse the effects. But even as I called him, a part of me hesitated. How could I trust him? Could I trust anyone? Alex, Dr. Harris said when he picked up the phone. I know what's happening to you. The device is trying to take control. You need to get to the lab where I worked. There's a way to shut it down. But you're running out of time. The urgency in his voice was enough to push me into action. I didn't have much time. I didn't know how long I could keep up the charade, pretending I was still in control of my own mind. The longer I waited, the harder it would be to fight the programming. I made my way to the lab Dr. Harris had mentioned. But as I got closer, the doubt began to creep in. What if it was a trap? What if Dr. Harris had been compromised too, working for the circle the entire time? Every step felt like a risk, and the fear was almost paralyzing. But I couldn't stop now. I couldn't let them win. When I arrived, I found Dr. Harris waiting for me. He led me inside, his face drawn with worry. We don't have much time, he said, motioning for me to follow him into a small, dimly lit room. This is the only place where we can try to reverse the process. But you need to be ready for what's coming. The moment we activate the device, the circle will know. I nodded, the weight of it all pressing down on me. I didn't want to know what was going to happen next, but I had no choice. I sat down in the chair Dr. Harris motioned toward, and he began to hook me up to a series of machines. I've done this before, he said, his voice steady. But you're the first person to ever ask me to reverse the procedure. You're lucky to even have a chance. I didn't feel lucky. I felt like a puppet, waiting for the strings to be cut. And then it happened. The device in my brain sent a pulse of energy through my system, and for a brief moment, everything went white. My body convulsed, and I felt like my very soul was being ripped out of me. But it wasn't just physical, it was mental. The control, the programming, the influence of the circle, it all seemed to collapse, falling away like a weight being lifted from my mind. I gasped for air, feeling a sense of clarity I hadn't experienced in years. The fog was gone. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could think clearly. I could make decisions for myself. But then, just as quickly as the clarity came, it was replaced by a deep, gnawing fear. The device was gone, but so was my sense of safety. The circle knew what I had done. They would come for me, and they would stop at nothing to silence me. The fight had just gotten even harder. But at least now, I knew I was in control. I looked up at Dr. Harris, who was staring at me with a mixture of relief and concern. You're free, he said quietly. But you're not safe. That much was clear. But now I had something the circle couldn't control, my mind. The weight of the decision hung heavily over me. I had always believed in fighting for what was right, but now, faced with the reality of the circle's grip on the world, the line between right and wrong had blurred. The odds were stacked against me, and I knew that every move from here on out could be my last. But there was no turning back. I had already lost too much: Victor, Sarah, my sense of security, my trust in the system I had once served. The circle had taken everything from me, and now it was time to take it back. I had the information, the proof, the technology needed to expose them. But that didn't mean the battle would be easy. The circle had eyes everywhere, and they knew I was coming for them. It was only a matter of time before they tracked me down, and when they did, I had to make sure they wouldn't stop me. The plan was simple, or so I thought. Sarah, the traitor, had led me here, but now it was time to turn the tables. I had learned from her mistakes. The resistance, what was left of it, had been pushed to the brink. But they were still fighting. Together, we would take down the circle's core operation. I met with the last remaining members of the resistance in an old warehouse, far from prying eyes. The tension was thick. Everyone knew what was at stake, and everyone knew the risks. We weren't just fighting against the circle anymore. We were fighting for the future of humanity, for the right to think, to feel, to be free. We go in quiet, I said, my voice steady but tinged with the anger I had been holding in for so long. We get the data, destroy the central network, and get out. No heroics. No time for mistakes. The plan was risky. The facility we were targeting was heavily guarded, and they had already made sure no one could breach it undetected. But we had no choice. If we didn't act now, we'd never have another chance. We made our way to the compound under the cover of night, moving swiftly and silently through the shadows. As we approached the facility, my mind kept returning to the same thought: what if I wasn't strong enough to finish this? The device was out of my head, but I still had scars. The fear, the self-doubt, it lingered. But I couldn't afford to focus on that. I had to stay sharp. If I showed any weakness, we'd all be dead. As we infiltrated the building, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The usual security measures were in place, but it didn't feel like we were the first ones to arrive. I started to wonder if Sarah had been feeding us false information, if this had all been a trap. But it was too late to turn back. We were already in. We reached the central network room, the heart of the Circle's operations. But when we opened the door, I froze. Standing in front of us was Sarah, her face unreadable. Behind her, several armed guards stood, their weapons trained on us. "You didn't think it would be that easy, did you?" Sarah's voice was cold, calculated. "You were never supposed to get this far." I felt the blood drain from my face. Betrayal, once again. But this time, it was different. I wasn't the same person I had been when I first started this fight. I had taken control of my mind. And now, I had to take control of the situation. "You were right," I said, my voice low, steady. "It wasn't easy. But you've underestimated me, Sarah. And you've underestimated the people you're working for." She stepped forward, the gun in her hand trembling slightly. "You think you've won? You think you can stop the Circle? They're everywhere, Alex. They always will be." I took a deep breath, my hand instinctively moving to the weapon at my side. "No. You're wrong. The Circle is just a name, a shadow. We're the ones with the power now." A tense silence filled the room. Sarah's eyes flickered with uncertainty, but she quickly masked it with defiance. "You don't have the strength to do this. You never did." "I don't need strength, Sarah," I said, stepping forward, my eyes locked on hers. "I need the truth." In that moment, everything changed. The rest of the resistance moved into position, the sound of footsteps echoing in the hallway. The guards hesitated, unsure of their next move. And in that brief moment of hesitation, I acted. I reached for my weapon, but before I could pull it, Sarah did the unthinkable. She dropped her gun, her face a mix of anger and regret. "Do what you have to do, Alex," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've made my choice." I didn't hesitate. I ordered the team to take down the remaining guards and disable the network. It was over. The Circle's reign of control had ended. We had won, but at what cost? The final showdown was over, but the reality of what we had accomplished didn't hit me right away. I had spent so long running, hiding, and fighting that I hadn't allowed myself to think about the consequences of our actions. The Circle was no more, their network destroyed, their grip on the world broken. But as I stood there, watching the facility burn in the distance, I couldn't help but wonder, what now? The world wasn't going to change overnight. It wasn't going to be a smooth transition where everything just snapped back into place. No, the damage had been done. People had lived under the influence of the Circle's mind control for so long, their thoughts manipulated, their actions directed. We had freed them from the chains, but the scars remained. Could they ever truly recover? I stood in front of the crumbling facility, my heart heavy with the weight of everything we had exposed. The truth was out now, but what would the world do with it? Would they believe us? Would they even care? After everything the Circle had done to cover their tracks, it wouldn't be easy to convince the public. They would deny it, fight against it, or simply bury it under more lies. But one thing was certain, we couldn't let the truth die. We had to make sure the world knew what had really happened. I looked over at Sarah, standing beside me. The woman who had betrayed me, the one I had trusted, the one who had ultimately helped bring down the circle. She wasn't the same person anymore, and neither was I. We had both been changed by everything that had happened, for better or worse. And yet, there was a silent understanding between us now. We couldn't undo the past, but we could try to move forward. "I never thought it would end like this," she said, her voice low. I nodded, my gaze fixed on the burning building. "None of us did. But it's over now. We've done what we could." The resistance, what was left of it, had already begun spreading the information we had uncovered. We had the evidence, the documents, the data, the footage. It would take time, but the truth would get out. It had to. The world needed to understand what the Circle had done, how far they had gone, and what they had been willing to sacrifice to achieve their vision of control. But even as I prepared to leave the facility behind, I knew there was one last piece of the puzzle I had to confront. The device, the one they had implanted in my brain, was gone, but the scars it had left behind were not so easy to erase. The fear, the lingering doubt, the sense of not knowing who to trust, it would never truly go away. But I had learned something throughout this journey. I didn't need to control the world, and I didn't need to trust anyone but myself. I was free. We all were. As the team and I made our way out of the facility, I looked back one last time. The Circle's empire had crumbled, but the fight for truth, for freedom, for the right to think and choose for ourselves, it wasn't over. It couldn't be. There would always be others who would try to manipulate, control, and suppress the truth. But now, at least, there were people like us, people who would fight back. People who would never allow the lies to take root again. I took a deep breath, finally feeling the weight lift from my shoulders. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was ours to walk. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't in years: hope. The truth had been exposed. And no matter how hard they tried to silence it, the world would never be the same.